Hello model railroaders, it's Dave. We're back in the garage and I've done up some test track ballast samples. The one on the left here is the fine Woodland Scenics Ballast. The next is my sifted 500 to 297 micron ballast, which is scale size based on the N scale, 1/160th. And next is the 841 to 500 micron ballast. And then as a trial, which I knew was going to look too big, but I wanted to compare anyway, is the 1191 to 841 micron ballast. So the ones I was most interested in are these two. Now I didn't do a fantastic ballasting job, but just enough to get the job done for comparison purposes. And that's what we're looking at here. Now just move that down so you can see. The 500 to 297 micron ballast is a little finer than what I'm seeing for the Woodland Scenics ballast. So that's interesting. So I'm actually going to re-sieve some Woodland Scenics ballast just to verify that the note that I had made was the proper note. Now, looking in comparison of the 500 to 297 to the 841 to 500, so that's above the 500 sieve and below the 500 sieve. That does look just a little bit, well, it's definitely bigger, of course, but if looking at the Woodland Scenics ballast on the left and then looking at that above the 500 micron pan, it's closer, but the 500 is a little bigger. So looks like I'm straddling the line. Now I do have to admit, to the eye, the Woodland Scenics Fine Ballast, you can differentiate the particles a lot easier. Now I don't know if that's because it's two-tone that you can see the particles either, compared to the more white/gray monotone of the finer ballast. But on the ballast that's above the 500 micron, you can definitely catch the crystalline structure and see the light shining on the edges of the larger ballast. So I don't really know how to go, whether I go prototypical size or I go oversize, or I do a mix of both of those pans and hopefully come up with something more visually representative of the Woodland Scenics ballast. So it's hard to say. Now I'm not sure how well it will show up, but looking at the particles on the ties, now I'm making the assumption that the railroad ties would be about 8 inches across at a minimum. Some of those particles are looking like they would be in the 4-inch range. Now looking at some of the particles from the under 500 micron tie, they do more represent something in the 3-inch or less range, where the Woodland Scenics, in comparison to a tie width, is definitely a little larger than scale. So it's a really hard choice, but I think it comes down to visual perspective, not prototypical sizing. that's going to be the issue. But I'm going to be back in a moment. I'm going to reset the camera up and let's sift some Woodland Scenics Fine Ballast and see exactly what sizes we're looking at. So, back in a moment. Okay, model railroaders, before I sift the fine ballast, I'm just going to give you an idea of what sieves that I had purchased here in case anyone actually is interested. So, they don't actually give a micron size. I had to more sort that out, but the GP2-120 is the 2000 micron size. The GP2-112 is the next size down. Then the GP2-130. Then the GP2-150. And then the GP2-170. So that is going in order of 2000 microns, and then 1191, 841, 500, and the last being the 297 micron that I've worked it out to. And again, prototypical ballast is 3/4 inch to 1.5 inch. So that's what we're looking at. So let me set the camera down, move the top two out because we know that it's well under the 1191 micron size. They're definitely all under a millimeter. And I'm just going to get some lines out. And so Woodland Scenics Fine Ballast, the gray blend, B1393 is their part number. And I'm going to dump about half the container in, and then we'll take a look at what we've got. And that'll be a good representative sample if I'm taking half the container as to what's in the fines and what's above the different sizes. So we'll just give it a shake and a shimmy and see what's on. And we're getting some in the that are greater than 841, interestingly enough. Those are, or it's just taken a little bit to get them sifted down. And pardon for any bongs, but it's hard to keep the pan shaken and over the bin to catch any fines at the same time. Okay. All right, so let's take a look and see what we've got at each level. So, out of half a ballast container, we've got, well, definitely probably about a 1/16 that is greater than 841 micron. And the 500 micron is the next sieve, and there's quite a lot. That is between 500 and 841, interestingly enough. And in comparison, there's a lot less than 500. So definitely the note I had was very wrong. Let me lap them over, if I can get both in the same shot, so that you can see the 500 and what's less than 500. So my note was completely wrong, that it's predominantly between 5 and 841 with some less than 500 but greater than 297 microns. So that's quite interesting. That just a little bit. Now let's take a look and see what we had for less than. So there's not a whole lot that's less than 291 micron. So if I've got to give them percentages, I'm going to say the fines are maybe 3%. The greater than 297 but less than 500, probably about 20%, maybe 25%, with 70 to 75%. Now this is just going visual, not weighing. To make it more accurate, I'd have to do weights, and I just don't have the capability to weigh this. So the predominantly is 500 with maybe 1% greater than 841. So that drastically changes my goal. So let me write the values down. I'll kind of re-guess with the camera off, and then we'll go over those percentages once more. Okay, back in a moment. Okay, model railroaders. So, using my best guesstimation, not weighing, but just visually, that the greater than 841 micron particles are about 3% for the Woodland Scenics Fine Ballast. Predominantly it is 500 micron to 841 micron, I'm guessing about 60%. The 297 to 500 micron is approximately 35%, with about 2% being less than 297 micron. Now, the realistic scale should be in the 297 to 500 micron. Let me just flip the page over, because prototypical ballast is 3/4 to 1.5 inch. So, looking at it, that are being generous at, say, 3-inch prototypical size would be 476 micron. So that's why I was looking at the 500 to the 297 micron as being prototypical size, yet Woodland Scenics for the fine ballast is greater, and even my estimate is actually going to have more larger than prototypical ballast size. So visually the Woodland Scenics ballast size works better. That the 841 micron and 500 micron, that range, it does look a little big on its own. So I believe I'm going to do another test and do a mix in the essentially, I guess, a 60-40 mix of 500 to 841 and 297 to 500 micron, and mix that up and have do another test track sample and see what that looks like. But I'm glad that I ran the Woodland Scenics ballast through. So it well, there's not a whole lot more to say. It is what it is. That it's a little oversized, but visually, to our eyes, it looks better. Can't have prototypical everything when we're getting that small. Of course, HO, you're already in that visual size range where it would look right to your eye. So I guess it's just an artifact of working in N scale that's more difficult. Now, I did try something else that during the winter I had picked up some ice with traction aid. And let me dig a scoop out for you so you can see it a little better. So in this, now I haven't ran it by size, but I'll bring it out here where there's some more light. You can see that there is some millimeter to 2 millimeter or 1,000 to 2,000 micron bits of rock mixed in with the ice, and that's your traction aid. And don't I know it, by getting it tracked in and transferred onto the hardwood floors, you really notice those little tiny chips of rock when they start digging into the hardwood. So what I did is I took a good scoop of it and I separated it the more, I guess, less laborious but more wasteful way, I will say, by taking a scoop, putting it in a container, and with that's the salt mixed in with the rock crush, and then just adding in a bit of hot water, shaking it up, decanting off the hot water, adding more hot water in, shaking it up, letting it sit overnight, decanting it off until I got the rock only left, and then let it dry after decanting the last bit of water out. So that may be an option, at least for the larger scales, but even riprap or whatever else that you might find on the layout, that may be a good source of a uniformish tone, because it's predominantly all gray, just different tones of gray rock. So that may be an option of you know, a $5 bag, and I ended up cutting off the bottom of the bag, so I don't know how many kilos it was. It was, I don't know, I'm going to say 10 pounds. I'll call it 10 pounds, because that's only a partial. I split it up between back door and front door containers. So, but that may be a source. The other way would be to get some gravel, and if you've got the sifters, to sift it down to get it. But I don't know how the color would be on the rock. I guess it would depend what quarry that it came from as to whether it would have more of a granite color mixed in with more of a limestone. This is probably more of a limestone color gray than anything else. But I thought that was a neat option of coming across stuff where all you really have to do is just dissolve the salt, or sit down with a pair of tweezers and it spread out and start picking the salt crystals out. I did end up with about a liter of salt water, brine, I guess you would call it. So I will, once I transfer this out of the container, I'll take the brine solution and put it in here and just let it sit in the garage and evaporate the water out so I can at least reclaim the salt for this winter. Then just break it up for spreading. But I thought that was a little neat source of some rock. Now, in the crushing aspect, I showed you about the mortar and pestle technique using a 2-foot section of half-inch pipe with a cap on it and a cylinder bottom, and just grinding away at it, and how it was producing a lot of fines. Well, since I don't have access to a welding setup to make a jaw crusher style of stone crusher, I thought I would try and take my very weakly powered bench grinder. It's only a 1.1 amp unit. I can stall it out if I try. And I just moved the fine wheel off, put it between some brackets so that it could move and it wasn't rigid, and then gapped it probably at most maybe about 1 millimeter, and just to see what I could get out of it without this end. It's just clamped at the end, so it can lift up and open the gap up a little more if any really big chunks came in. But there's what I've generated. I haven't generated enough yet to sift it to see a comparison of the fines against using the mortar and pestle technique. But it's not really ideal for the large pieces, as you can see, that they'll go through on the flat edge and not really crush down. So it may only be good for crushing down, say, more of the square 2000 micron mesh stuff. So we'll have to see how that goes, and I'll give you an update if I have any success. But so far it's a lot more dustier because the wheel spins the dust out, because it is grinding as the wheel rotates. It may be better if both wheels were moving to pop it out and it wouldn't kind of catch and grind. I do have to give this wheel a bit of a rotation to make it spit the chunk of rock through the contact area rather than it just sitting there being ground by the coarse grit wheel. So it was worth a try. I didn't spend any money to give it a go, just some of my time. So if I can micronize down some of the 2,000, just under 2,000, 1,000 to 2,000 size particles, then that will work in my favor in giving me the 500 to 800, or I guess in this case the 250 to 800 micron range that Woodland Scenics does like to use. So that's how I've been spending my evenings since the last video, just trying to sort out here in the garage when it wasn't too hot and nasty humid. But we've had a rain come through yesterday, so the humidex is about 10 degrees Celsius lower. I think our actual temperature and humidex temperature are just about identical now, so it's actually nice being about probably about 74 Fahrenheit, I would say, at the moment. So, but there we go. I'll do a mix and I'll update you in a future video, and I may cut these cut the foam down so I can swap them around side to side and do a better comparison. That I think may help matters. So till the next video, I hope you're having some success and enjoy the long weekend and get to work on your layout. Till the next video, bye for now.